Am I okay? Can everyone hear me?
Yes.
Perfect. So I'm a registered dietitian, and I'm also part of the plant-based and sustainability special interest group. So we're small and slowly growing, but we're quite new as well. We've only set up last year. And today I hope to go through kind of some of the main myths. I'll start with reasons for going plant-based, some of the definitions if you're very new to this, and then just link back a little bit with sustainability. I know you'll hear more later on in the day. So why do people go on a plant-based diet? There's a few reasons. Ethics plays a role, environment as at the topic today, health, and also religion. Plant-based diets is quite a broad term. The main thing is, the focus on whole foods, including more vegetables, more whole grains, legumes, nuts, and seeds. It may or may not include small or moderate amounts of animal foods. It's broad, and technically the guidelines today are plant-based. It's at the bottom of the food pyramid. It's making up the majority of the food plates we see today. For example, this is the newest guidelines. But the reality of Western diets is, more of the time it looks a bit more like this. The protein is the star of the meal, and it's about pushing a bit more towards that, at least half that plate being vegetables. So this is just some definitions, and you can see, plant-based, very broad. It can be, 2/3 plants. It can be a little bit more, up to, totally vegan, excluding all animal products. The myths and kind of problems kind of seem to arise. The more plant foods you exclude, people get more worried. So I'm going to use a fully plant-based diet as I go through the myths. But of course, it can include small amounts of animal products. So the first thing is it unsafe? When I started this, that's what I worried about as well. Can everybody do it? What about the elderly? What about children? What about pregnant women? And the nice thing is the position of the American Academy of Nutrition and Dietetics is that it can be helpful, but the main thing is they have to be well planned. And it can have benefits in prevention and treatment of diseases, and it can be for all stages of life, but planning is needed. So the second thing, as the previous speaker mentioned, you can't get enough protein. That's the first thing you think of. If you've never heard of, veganism or vegetarianism, you worry, where is it going to come from? But the reality is, all plant foods contain some protein, and some fat, and meat isn't just protein either. There's carbohydrates. They're all made up of elements. So, to give you an example, an apple or a pear will be quite low in protein, but then there are other sources which can make up that 1/4 of the plate that we want to be the protein source. And then just a little bit more protein. So the building blocks are amino acids. There's around 20 in the body we need for the production of protein, but only 9 are essential. That means that they must come from food. And animal proteins are thought of as complete proteins because the way they're made up, they have all the essential amino acids in a close match to what we need as humans. Plants are thought of as incomplete, and that would make you assume that they don't have some of those amino acids. They do, just some of them have them in small amounts. So to give you an example here, so the grains usually lack lysine and beans methionine. So in the 1950s, the first kind of vegetarian and vegan guides came out, and they said, you have to combine these, you have to eat one and the other together. We know now it's not essential because your body stores all the essential amino acids, and then it builds them up together to make the protein. But you do need a constant supply of these, and variety is key. There are a few that are, they could deem complete. That includes soy, hemp seed, buckwheat, and amaranth are the main ones. So they actually can provide you with all the essential amino acids in good amounts for humans. Now, lysine is quite the one that we need to be careful of, especially if you're vegan. You can have low intakes, so it is recommended that you have 3 daily servings of lysine-rich foods a day. Now, there's plenty of different ones, and legumes are quite good at providing it. A little bit more about legumes, that includes peas, beans, lentils, and peanuts. Some patients, you hear lentils, they don't have a clue what you're talking about. You do have to explain it, and some people don't have a clue how to cook with these. So it is important to mention their benefits. you know. And not only are they high in lysine, they're also high in energy, protein, and fibre. They don't have any cholesterol. They're high in B vitamins and minerals. What's more, you know, they've been linked with decreased risk of cardiovascular disease. They increase satiety. They promote good microbiome, and they can help in diabetes and in general in glucose control because they're quite a low GI food. So there is a concern though that, you know, legumes, you're going to be bloated, gassy, uncomfortable, and we see that a lot when people start suddenly introducing all this fibre into their diet. They're very excited and they start going everything fibre, high fibre this, high fibre that, loads of legumes. It can happen. The main thing is if you're not including any of these foods, you know, it's about slow introduction. And to make sure you get that 3 servings of lysine, you know, you can have 1 serving of legumes, 1 serving of soy foods, and then something that's quite, you know, less gas promoting, like quinoa, pistachios, or cashews, for example. And then we go on to soy, and, you know, even now, you hear doctors have concerns about soy and the risk of cancer, especially breast cancer. But thankfully the research is out there showing otherwise. So soy, like I said, you know, it has all the essential amino acids in significant amounts. Not only that, it has phytoestrogens, and they're called plant estrogens, and this is where the problem kind of starts. So because plant estrogens, you know, are similar to estrogens, it's thought that they act the same. They have a mild activity. It's very different to the estrogen in our systems, and because high estrogen levels have been linked with high risks of cancer, that's where the query comes. You know, are they related? But a lot of the studies were done on animals, and we know that they digest soy differently than we do. And in general, human studies show, you know, consuming soy doesn't increase the risk of cancer. Actually, in fact, it might be linked with reduction of risk. It's also linked with the reduction of LDL cholesterol, roughly 5%, if you include 1 to 2 servings a day. What's next? Myth 5 is, you know, you think it's low in nutrients, it's going to be low in vitamins, and it's going to be low in minerals. Well, vegetarians and vegans, compared to omnivores, have higher intakes of all of these. For example, 80% of the Irish population have low fibre intakes. It's around 20 for the Irish population, and we're looking at 25 to 35. That's the recommendation. And again, when it comes to your 5 a day, most people only get 2.5. And even the guidelines now are you know, going towards 5 to 7 at least, you know, if you're an omnivore. So we actually, you know, omnivores can actually be deficient in all these, so that's kind of the benefit of the plant-based diet. Then there are things you need to be cautious of, and these are the nutrients. I'm not going to go through all of them, but I'll touch on the main ones. So even though iron we tend to get more of on a vegan or vegetarian diet, absorption is the problem. You know, iron deficiency anemia is still quite prevalent worldwide, and you know, it's mostly important for menstruating women, children, and teenagers. But vegans and vegetarians are not at any greater risk, but it's something we need to be aware of. Why is this absorption a problem? Well, there's 2 types of iron, heme and non-heme iron. Heme is much better absorbed, and it's only found in animal foods. The problem is though, high heme intakes have also been linked with problems like, you know, increased risk of colorectal cancer, type 2 diabetes. So it doesn't mean that, you know, it's all great to just all go for the protein, and that's what we're seeing in today's culture. You know, we need the protein, and it's protein bars and it's protein shakes, and you know, that's kind of where we need to be a bit careful. And the non-heme sources are also good. It's just we need to make sure we actually absorb them. So just this is an example. You can see sometimes, you know, even though the soy milk can be higher in iron, but it's the absorption factors that are preventing us from getting all that in our body. So even though heme iron, you know, is only about 10% intake for omnivores, it actually makes up 40% of their iron that's absorbed in the body. So it is needed. And then if you're going for a plant-based diet, you need to make sure you get all the benefits and you get that non-heme. How you can do that? Vitamin C is the #1 thing. There's a study showing that 50 micrograms of vitamin C increased absorption 6-fold. So what that looks like, 50 micrograms, a kiwi, it's around 130 grams of the other things, or a glass of orange juice. Also, onions or garlic can increase absorption by 50%. So it's really important to include those foods, and we tend to do that. You add your lemon to your curries or things like that, and loads of fruits and veg, and you see that on plant-based diets. Actually, if you're a vegan or vegetarian, you'll probably have a 1.5 times more vitamin C intake than an omnivore. So that's probably why in general we're not at risk of deficiency if you have that well-balanced diet. So the other thing that's stopping the absorption is phytate. So it's a very simplified look of what phytate looks like. Phytate is the green, and it's a compound that binds onto iron, zinc, and calcium, and it stops our body from being able to absorb it. So what we can do is we can break that bond between phytate and these elements, and we can do that by fermentation, soaking, sprouting, toasting nuts and seeds, juicing, or blending. The other thing that stops absorption is tannins. So coffee, tea, and actually high doses of calcium can actually stop absorption from iron, so it's best to keep them to between meals. And then the next myth is vegans don't need to supplement B12. So B12 is essential for neurological function and for the blood formation. And this kind of myth almost comes from the fact that our liver is able to store 2 to 3 micrograms of B12 in our bodies, and that's enough for around 3 years. But that's not for everybody. It really depends on our body's ability to absorb the B12. As we age, that can decrease. It depends on your diet before. So if you were, let's say, vegetarian for 20 years and then you go vegan, if you can't base your B12 intake on your liver stores and depend on it, it's not the safest. So B12 is made by microorganisms. It's made by the intestinal bacteria. In a lot of animals, they can actually absorb it back. In humans, it's made by microorganisms, but they're lower down, so we actually can't absorb it. So we do need to get it from food. Now, there are some people claiming you can get it from plants, because of microorganisms. So maybe if you don't wash your vegetables or things like that. A lot of the times, they're actually inactive forms of B12. Studies don't really look at that when they look at plant sources, but a lot of times it's just not reliable. So it's best to get it from a supplement. The other thing is, we see this is the latest meta-analysis, and it's looking at vegans and vegetarians, and the deficiency, it's wide. It can be from 0 to 86%, and that's because some people do supplement, some people do use fortified foods. And then the other thing is, with low levels of B12, you can have increased homocysteine levels, so it almost can negate the positive cardiovascular protective risks. Protection from vegan and vegetarian diets, so B12 is really, really essential. And you can get that from having at least 2 types of fortified foods. Don't depend on one. You never know. Maybe that batch doesn't have enough B12. So two fortified foods a day, or a supplement daily or a few times a week. Next is iodine. I didn't want to leave it out because it's often missed. Only now plant foods and plant milks are starting to be fortified with iodine. It's one we can kind of forget about. Deficiency is a problem in Europe. Our soils are quite deficient in iodine. Ireland has kind of medium status, not great. We're not reaching the recommended micrograms per year, but it's almost there. The problem is though, when you look at the recommended daily intake of 150 micrograms, and then you look at the EPIC Oxford study for intakes of vegans, you see 58 micrograms only. So we tend to be deficient in it without supplements or taking them from food. So where do we get them? A lot of countries put iodine in salt, they fortify it. In Ireland that's not the case. You can get them in some health shops, but it's not across the board. Then you can get it from milk or fish. That's kind of in the Irish population the most intake, and you see as fish intake increases, so does the iodine content of the diet. Then seaweeds you can use, but they can have really high levels. So it's recommended 3 to 4 times a week. Something like nori is very safe, but then if you're looking at all the other ones, you can really, per gram they can have a lot of iodine. The other thing is, just use the supplement, and no more than 150 micrograms. That's kind of your safety net for daily. Next thing is bone health. We worry about if you're not having dairy, where are you going to get the calcium? That's a huge question, and this is how much we need per day. And the reality is, even omnivores have 40% of intake from plant foods, so it's not only dairy. And some some plant sources do have oxalates, which stop the absorption, make calcium unavailable, like spinach or Swiss chard. But then others, like broccoli and kale and collards, can have up to 50% availability. So that's actually better than dairy. Dairy is around the same as the fortified plant milks, which is 25 to 30%. So on to, do vegans need less calcium? So this is quite complicated science of this, so I won't go into it too much. But because high protein diets have been linked with needing to neutralize the pH in your blood, what's needed is calcium to neutralize the blood, and we think that because the calcium leaching out of blood and going into our system, that's being passed out in the urine. So that's how omnivores basically need more, because that keeps on happening to neutralize blood levels. But a lot of the research has only looked at isolated proteins, not whole proteins, and whole proteins have phosphates, which actually negate that a little bit. So it's not clear, if vegans do need less. But we definitely see from all the meta-analyses and the intakes that they don't meet the RDAs usually of the 800 micrograms. So it's something not to be brushed off, and it's important to include those leafy greens and nuts and seeds to make sure you do get the calcium. Now, bone health isn't just calcium. Vitamin D is also important, and it's recommended we get 10 micrograms per day. If it's sunny, you're looking at 10 to 15 minutes for light skin in the sun, but no factor, no smog. The possibility, of being sunburned, it needs to be there for you to make that vitamin D from your skin. In Ireland, October to March, you can't make the vitamin D. It's just the altitude of rat, it's not possible, so it's recommended we supplement at least 10 micrograms. And in the summer, if you feel you're getting out a bit in the sun, it's still good to either have a supplement or use fortified foods. So if you're looking at vegan vegetarian sources, that can be plant milks, it can be fortified cereals, or it can be UV rated mushrooms. So again, even broadening it up more, bone health is not just calcium and vitamin D, it's also exercise, it's fruit and veg, it's low sodium, and it's healthy weight. So actually decreased, very quick, rapid weight loss is associated with form bone health as well. Now on to essential fatty acids. We've heard a little bit about the omega-6 and 3, and like we said before, omega-6 is plenty in the vegan vegetarian diets. It's the omega-3 we need to worry about a little bit more. Omega-3 can go even further and make long chains of DHA and EPA, and it's not essential. The DHA and EPA is not essential because it can be made from ALA, but the conversion is very unpredictable. And like I said before, optimal production, you need 1-to-1 or 4-to-1 ratio. In our omnivore diets, it's around 10-to-1. In vegans, it can be up to 18-to-1, 40-to-1. It's because we eat so many of the grains and beans and pulses that have the omega-6. Omnivores get the DHA and EPA from fish. Vegetarians, there's some DHA in eggs. Vegans, none in the diet. And what can you do instead, though? If you're worried about your intake, you can get some straight from the source, the algae, and it's now at the moment it's recommended to have around 2 or 3 days where you're supplementing with these to stay on the safe side. Myth 7 is that plant-based diets are restrictive. A lot of people worry that they're going to be cutting everything out, and it doesn't have to be the way. The main thing is to make that shift, to make that the plate at least half plants. It doesn't have to be very hard. It can be things you're already eating, like a peanut butter and banana sandwich. It's just including more and more, and it's pushing all some of the animal sources out. The more of the plants you include on that plate, some of the animal products will be pushed out because you'll be too full then. So that's the main thing, and the health benefits are really there for even including a little bit. So just a little bit with the environment, and then I'll go into a little bit of the sustainability guidelines. So, why do we care about this? Well, animal production is responsible for 1/3 of agriculture's greenhouse gases. Food is a major source of degradation of water, soil, biodiversity, and food waste is a huge issue. Around 50% of food is wasted. Lots of the fish stock is overly or fully exploited. So it's an issue, and it's affecting everybody, and it will affect everybody into the future. So This is a definition for low environmental impact diets consistent with good health. There's loads of definitions about sustainability and what's a sustainable diet, but this one's actually been kind of adopted by the British Dietetics Association when they are devising their Blue Dot guidelines. So it's about diversity, it's about, you know, mainly whole foods, meat moderation if eaten at all, dairy as well, you know, moderation, unsalted seeds and nuts, small quantities of fish, limited consumption of the high fat, high sugar, high salt, oils, you know, try and get that ratio of omega-3 to omega-6 right, and mainly tap water. Avoid the soft drinks. So the PTA have the One Blue Dot sustainability resources online, and they're great. Lots of information there, and they also make the point of, you know, even decreasing your your meat intake by you know, from a high intake of over 100 grams per day to moderate can decrease your carbon footprint by 22%. You know, so you see the less animal products you include, the better your carbon footprint. But it doesn't mean that everybody has to be down there vegan. You know, it's every little helps really. You know, like I said before. Now these are the sustainability diet recommendations from the PTA. So again, it's not, you know, go vegan. It's include more of this, decrease that more of this. You know, it's looking at those shifts and what you can do. In the little ways, you know, and picking one or two of those at a time. You know, you can't change everything at once. A lot of people find that overwhelming, but just pointing them in the right direction, you know, it can be helpful. And these are just some of the kind of dietary guidelines out there. Vegan food plate is really handy. The PTA have actually come out with a vegan eat well guide as well this week. I couldn't get an image that was good enough, but they have vegetarian, vegan, and, you know, kind of an omnivore one as well. So it can be helpful. And these are some just the useful links. Vegan for Life is a great book if someone's really interested. The two books are written by dietitians, so I just thought I'd put them up there. And thank you very much.